Here. I'm back to do my November wrap up. I'm going to be filming this in two parts because when I'm filming this, it's November 27th and I still have about a weekend left, so I hope I can tackle a few more reads. I will admit, November was a little bit of a weird reading month. It just was. It was an election. The election happened and I felt like the election lasted like 17 years. It was a very, very long election cycle. It really distracted me, I'll be honest, in those first 2 weeks. I spent a lot of time watching the news, seeing what was going to happen. I'm still watching the news. And then the COVID crisis kind of hit its third wave at this point. My school shut down again. So yeah, it's just been a bit of a weird week. I did read a lot. I've read some bigger books, so I think that like shortened my the amount of books that I read in November, but I'm still on track to read 200 books this year, which is what I wanted. But I just was really unfocused this month in my reading. But I liked everything that I read. I just found most of the books I read I really enjoyed, but I just felt I was a little bit unfocused, and working from home for 2 weeks definitely lessened my reading, especially my listening time, because during COVID learning the first time around, I wasn't required to do Google Meets for all my classes, so I had a lot of listening time. And now this time we were doing virtual learning, we have to do Google Meets with all our classes, which is fine. I think it goes a lot easier, but lessens my listening time a little bit. But yeah, let's get into it. So the first book that I finished in, I think it was at the end of October or the early November, was Deck of Ohms by Christina Lynn Herman. This is the sequel to The Devouring Grey. I really wound up liking this one. I thought that it was a really solid conclusion to the series. This book series definitely reminds me of Stranger Things. I really wound up liking it. It definitely took the ending was not one I necessarily predicted. I thought it was a really eerie and creepy read, kind of going along with reading books about creepy forests. I actually read 3 in a row. And they were all like a little bit different, but I really liked the characters in this. I thought that we had enough of point of views, and it was just an interesting world. I'm really excited to see what they write next, and I heard a rumor that this might be getting adapted with the girl that was in the Mortal Instruments TV series, and if that's true, I'm so game for that because I like her as an actress. I think this would make a great TV show. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars for a review. During election week was to do like a feel-good-a-thon and read like 4 books that week that just were supposed to make me feel happy and excited and just like relax, and it literally took me all month to read most of these books. But the first book I wound up reading was House on the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Kuhn, and I gave this book 5 stars. I thought it was great and perfect. Here's a picture. If you've not heard about this book yet, I don't know what you've been doing with your life, but I'm going to give you guys my thoughts now. So many good things about this book, and this is a book that's really hard to like give into like a genre. I don't know if I would say it's middle grade. I don't know if I would say it's adult. I don't know if I would say it's a YA. It's kind of a book that doesn't really have a genre, but you follow this character, and his whole job is he is like goes out and checks in on these magical children. And he goes to these foster homes and makes sure that they're being taken care of, and he's very much like a by the book guy. But he gets assigned this top secret orphanage where he is going to see like the most dangerous children in like the whole world. And it just kind of takes it off in a weird direction. It was a really, really heartwarming read. It had found family. It had, an LGBTQ plot, which I was really fond of. The characters, the kids were just adorable. Just put a smile on my face. The end made me so happy. I remember I was on the train going to work. I remember I was crying tears of happiness because I just was like so happy with this book. It was perfect. I have a couple of other books by T.J. Kuhn. I have The Extraordinaries, which is also on my TBR, potentially for 2021, but I really like his writing style like quite a bit. It just made me happy. So that was a book that I wound up giving 5 stars to. I'm so happy that I wound up getting around to reading it, and it was on my like feel good-a-thon TBR, but also on my end of the year TBR. The next book I pick up was just to make me happy, and this was Hope Never Dies by Andrew Schaefer. This I got a couple years ago at BEA, and I just kept on putting it off and putting it off and putting it off, and I just decided to just pick it up, and it was just charming. It's just like a fictional account of Biden after him and Obama leave the White House, and they wind up getting sucked up in a mystery that is connected to a former train conductor that Biden knew, and it was just adorable. I really liked it. I wound up giving it like 3 stars. There's a sequel that I will definitely try to get my hands on, but it was just heartwarming. It definitely looked at their relationship in like a really interesting way. The relationship part wasn't what I was expecting for this book, but I'm really excited to see what the relationship becomes for book 2. And I heard rumor that we might even be getting a third book. So it was just a fun read and one that just made me really, really happy. So 4-star, like I would say 3.75 stars, or 3.5 stars, but it was really enjoyable. So I was happy that I finally got to read it. Was to read quite a few adult fantasy, and I struggled with this, and I think that this is why this was like the worst month for me to choose to read adult fantasy, because everything was going on and I was so unfocused. But I did wind up finishing reading Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. I did like the world building in it. I like the characters. I struggled with the pacing a little bit, but basically this follows a world where metal is used as a magic system, and you follow 2 main characters that are kind of sucked into this world. You follow a thief and you follow like a rebelling thing to try to overtake society. And it's a very long timetable in book 1. Like this book takes like close to 2 to 3 years to do. So it was a very like slow paced story, but because again it's a war, and I said this before, I'm not the biggest fan of war-based novels, but I did like the characters, I did like the world building, I did like the story. I just struggled a little bit with the pacing and it just wasn't my favorite. I do have Way of Kings on my TBR, and I might try to read that eventually, and just probably sooner rather than later, and just see how I feel about it, because I liked Mistborn. I like the characters. Again, I wasn't super focused this month, and I think that's why I struggled a little bit with it, but I did wind up giving it like 3.5 stars. I liked it. I didn't love it, but I'm definitely going to check out book 2. And then the next book that I wound up finishing was actually an audiobook, and that is Becoming by Michelle Obama. This was a book I've been reading for quite a while, and it's because I fell so far behind on this book because of listening to a lot of political podcasts, but I love Michelle Obama. She could read me her grocery list and I would be invested. I really loved her point of view. I loved how this book was separated into like 3 sections: Becoming Me, Becoming Us, and Becoming More. Becoming Us was all about her childhood and growing up, and then Becoming Us was about her meeting and marrying Barack, and then Becoming More was about her time in the White House. I thought all sections were really interesting. I remember reading and I'm like, oh, I really want to get to the White House part of it, but I was really engaged in all of them. I think she has such a unique voice, and just really reading about her life in the world is so fascinating. And I've really been trying this year to kind of expand my reading and kind of expand the authors I've been reading and the topics I've been reading about. This was the first political themed novel that I did read this year, and then it kind of sent me on a tailspin to read quite a few more of them. But again, I really liked it. I really love her as a writer. I really hope she writes more things in the future. But she's just a great storyteller. She just is. And I know she has like, her and Barack have a deal with Netflix. I hope that they put up some new like diverse content as well. But overall, really impressed with her book, and I'm just kicking myself that it took me so long to read it, because it was a really, really amazing biography, and I would recommend it to anyone that wants like just a view about someone else's life, but also about how the inner workings of a White House what it is like to be a first lady. And I really liked how she became so much a presence in our lives, but it really wasn't what she was wanting to do. It also talked about balancing and just like about a lot of other issues, and I just found it to be a super compelling read. So definitely a recommendation for me. Definitely recommend the audiobook because she reads it to you, and she is just an incredible narrator. I decided that I needed a little bit of a mental break from all the heavy fantasy I was reading, which was only one, which was Mistborn. So I went back to my Feel Good-a-thon TBR and picked up the rest of those books. So I wound up reading Among the Beast and Briars by Ashley Poston. I can never say her name right. I apologize. But this was one that just really was just a fun read. But it basically follows this girl named Cirrus, and she lives in a small village outside of a forest, and the forest is magic, and her town is protected from this forest. But if you go into the forest, you are kind of in danger because the forest is like a sentient being. But during a coronation for the new princess, things go horribly wrong. She has to go on an adventure to save the day with her fox best friend and a bear as a companion. I will say this is a book that I would argue is like a great mix between YA and middle grade. I've always, like, I've been looking in recent months just to kind of find some books that kind of bridge that path. This book, I think, would really be that, because when I was reading it, I thought it was very much reminiscent of like a fairy tale series, but also had enough fun elements to kind of drag in the middle grade crowd. But it did have a romance plotline, which I liked. I liked the characters. I liked the dual point of views. I like the magic system in this as well. It reminded me a little bit of Forest of Souls and Devouring Grey. Those were the 3 Forest books I've read recently, like really, really close together. Reminds me a little bit more of Forest of Souls, but I really wound up liking it. It was definitely like eerie and creepy. The characters were fun. There was a couple of plot twists at the end that I definitely did not see coming, but I wound up really liking it. I wound up giving it 4 stars. I can definitely see like a companion book coming. Definitely could see it with like the last chapter. I'm curious if that's gonna happen, but I wound up really liking this and wound up giving it 4 stars for review. So yeah. And then the next book was one that, again, was one that everyone was talking about, and I follow him on Twitter, and I think he's adorable. But Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas is another book that I just had on that TBR, and I was really determined to pick it up and finally get around to it. So Cemetery Boys follows, and this is a trans, it has a trans lead, which the diversity is really, really well done and really, really well crafted. This is only the second trans novel I've actually ever read. But it also is a little bit eerie and a little bit creepy, perfect for Halloween or around like now at times because it's getting creepy in the air. But it follows this guy named Yadriel, and he is trying to convince his parents or his family that he can become a bruja, which his family is very, very adamant that he not become. But he winds up going through that process, and he winds up summoning a ghost that he was not planning on summoning. And they wind up having a relationship, and it's just really fun. There's like a mystery at the heart of it. Again, both mysteries in these books I did not predict, and I'm normally pretty good at predicting mysteries, but like the self-discovery elements just really stood out to me, and it was just a book that just put a smile on my face. And I really can't wait for his next book. It comes out in early March or February in 2021. I'm definitely going to be checking it out, but I thought this book had a nice balance between creepy, self-discovery, it was a really, really nice read. One that again put a smile on my face, and I was really invested in the romance. So picked up was just another Regency romance. I've been reading them a little bit more recently, and this one was one that I had heard had a plot point that I was kind of looking into. So it's This God of Mine by Sophie Jordan. Picture is here. Plot point. So if you don't want to know the plot point, then just kind of like don't watch this little clip. But I for some reason I like pregnancy and Regency romances. I don't know why. It's just a plot point that I like. This is also the first Scottish Highland romance that I've checked out. But you basically follow this girl named Clara. I think her name is Clara. And she has been ruined by society, so she goes to live with her brother in the Scottish Highlands. She winds up getting into this relationship with a young man who thinks he's cursed. She lies and tells everyone she's pregnant with another man's baby, but she's not really pregnant. He decides to marry her thinking, oh, it's perfect. I can't have kids. She's already pregnant. We can be a family. Doesn't really go that way. It was really, really fun. And it's like a companion series. So the next book follows the maid. Thought it was steamy. I really liked it. Very, very fun. 3.5 stars. Really, really solid. And I'll definitely check out more Scottish Highlander romances in the future. And then I wound up picking up City of Brash by S.A. Chakraborty, which I'll talk about probably at the end of this video. But I have been going through quite a few like political memoirs. I'm just going to talk about them a little bit. I did wind up finishing Fear by Bob Woodward. Opening to me, and I just that's all I'm gonna say. I thought it was a really well crafted book. I thought the audiobook was really, really good, really, really well researched, and I just was fascinated to read it. I'm also right now in the middle of listening to Rage, just his sequel, and I'm listening to that now. I have about 2 hours left of it. So the next time you guys see me, it will be closer to the end of the month in a couple of days, where I'm gonna wrap up the rest of the books that I read. Yeah, so see you guys in a few minutes. Well, for you, it will be in a few minutes. For me, it will be in a few days. Bye, guys. Hey, guys. Lori here. I'm actually here to wrap up this wrap-up. I just wanted to talk through the last 2 books that I know that I'm going to finish in the month of November. And the first one was the sequel to Fear, which is Rage by Bob Woodward. This book was very similar to the first one, but it followed like a different timetable, I would say. This book was focused more on like the last year and a half of his presidency. It was very interesting. It dealt a lot with the coronavirus pandemic and that situation, which again, I found these books super interesting. Definitely recommend them if you want a little bit more look in the White House. Again, Bob Woodward is a very, very respected journalist. I've heard him talk about these topics a lot. Really interesting to me, definitely worth a read, and I would definitely check out more books by this author in the future. And the last book I just finished reading was City of Brass by Eshe Chakraborty. This was the Time Warp YA Book Club book choice, and I wound up liking it. I struggled a little bit with the pacing in it. I think that's just my mood this month. I really wanted to read shorter books, but I did like the characters. This is a mythology themed novel. It follows two characters. I follow Naidra, who finds out she's not an ordinary girl in a couple of different ways, and then you follow Ali, who's the crown prince of the realm. Their paths wind up crossing. I wound up liking it. I would say I gave it like 3.5, 4 stars. I struggled a little bit with the pacing and a little bit with the world building, but overall I thought it was a very, very fun story. It reminded me a lot of Aladdin, and other mythology books I've read. I thought it was a step up from middle grade. I really liked it. I'll definitely check out Kingdom of Copper soon, maybe early 2021. And I do have an arc of Empire of Gold. But yeah, so that's my reading wrap up for the month of November. I definitely didn't have the best reading month, but as I talked about previously in the video, there was a lot of stress this month and anxiety. But I did wind up liking what I read. So now the next time you guys see me, the next wrap up you guys will see will be my last one of 2020. That's crazy. But I'll talk to you guys later. I'll talk to you guys at the end of the month for that wrap up. Be sure to check out my Bookmas videos that will start going out mid-December to the end of January, where I wrap up my year. I hope you guys will watch those videos, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.